Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge. So we mentioned this on the last episode, but we were in Sheffield last Saturday for the new Crossed Wires Podcast Festival, which pulled a lot of big names. Adam Buxton was there, Greg James, a lot of big names, and us. But we had, didn't we? We had a very entertaining train journey up there, especially the connecting train from Doncaster to Sheffield, which was, I mean, it was full of young lads, like late teens, all on the sauce, shall we say, at about 2:30 in the afternoon. And they were all singing Oasis songs, weren't they?
They were, and not just like famous Oasis. They were singing Up in the Sky, which is kind of a deep cut as far as drunk train singing goes, I think. Yeah, we had no idea. I was wondering, I was like, what's happening? Why are they all singing Oasis songs? And then we found out later, didn't we?
Yeah. We just thought it was proof of the enduring legacy of Oasis, but no, turned out Liam Gallagher was playing in Sheffield that night. So we arrived in Sheffield, made straight for the Rutland Arms, sorted out our questions, and then we did the show, our first live Price of Music in front of an audience, a wonderful audience. Thank you again if you were in the room. And we spoke as part of the show, part of the recording. We spoke to a couple of Sheffield-based guests who were both brilliant, weren't they? I thought, in terms of, you know, what they conveyed and how they explained what they did.
I think so, yeah. Just in terms of, like, neither of them were self-promoting. They were just talking about what they do and how it works and what they think. It was a really good pair of interviews.
So we spoke to Sarah Brooksbank, who managed Back for Lashes and currently looks after people like Fat White Family and Flo Hio, as well as our other guest, who was Ross Orton, he's a musician, songwriter, producer. He's worked with all sorts of artists over the years, as well as making his own music. But including, on his CV, one of the things obviously which stands out, he worked on the Arctic Monkeys' career-defining AM album, amongst other things. But as I say, they gave us great insight into what they do, as you're about to hear, beginning with Sarah.
Here?
I think I've just sat next to your beer, haven't I?
That's not my beer.
Isn't it your beer?
No.
Okay. Is it my beer?
I don't know whose beer
it
that
is now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Ross. Don't worry, we'll mind it for you.
Yeah.
Sarah's manager of acts like Fat White Family and Flo Hio, and also, funnily enough, Ross Orton is going to be joining us in a bit, and managed Back for Lashes for a decade or more. It's a strange job, management, isn't it? Because when it goes well, it's probably the artist who thinks they're doing really well, and when it's going badly, it's the manager's fault. I don't know how you got into this in the first place. When did you think, I can manage people? And did you know what you were letting yourself in for?
I think you have to have a sort of good combination of skills, probably. I'm a music fan, you know, I got into it because I really love music. I don't come from a sort of musical family or a musical background, but just really loved music and being involved with it, but sort of knew I didn't want to be a musician, a person on stage. You know, I'm a backstage person, not a front of stage person. In fact, sat here on this mic is like really unusual for me. So yeah, I just loved music and wanted to get involved with it. I'm quite an organised person, I suppose, but really enjoy being around that chaos and creativity, and I guess can speak that language as well as being, you know, underpinning that with sort of bits of structure and organisation. So yeah, I suppose you have to sort of be comfortable with working in those both sides of that world in a way to be a manager.
How much did you know who was the first artist you managed?
Well, I was running a nightclub in Manchester for quite a while before I sort of got into management. And I was really lucky to have an exceptionally sort of unique learning experience in management, because I was taken on by a company called Wildlife Entertainment to work as the day-to-day manager. And the day-to-day manager is the person that sort of works underneath the main manager doing the sort of day-to-day jobs like taking people to promo, organising the schedules and looking after the diary, doing the budgets and, just stuff like that, day-to-day stuff. And you do have a lot of contact with the artists in that sense. But I was taken on to do that for a band that weren't signed at the time called the Arctic Monkeys. And we worked in... we had an office where they had a rehearsal room next door. So I was like on a computer, with them sort of rehearsing in the background. And that was just an incredibly good learning curve. I think it's quite rare that you get to work on something that takes off that quickly and you get to sort of go through the gears with an act, seeing it from, I used to drive them around in my little metro to interviews, in Sheffield, to... obviously, they became incredibly famous and successful and well known. And then Ian, who was their manager at the time, said to me, I was living in Sheffield at that point, as were the band. And he said to me, do you want to move to London? And, the band are obviously all over the world now. So I went to work in the London office at Wildlife, at which point I got given other acts to work on. I think Ian was working with Travis at the time as well, who were quite big at that point, and we had Craig David as well back then, years ago. Miles Kane, Last Shadow Puppet. So I got, although I'd worked in music before, I was like running nightclubs and working in dance music and DJs and stuff like that. I hadn't had sort of management experience before, but that was just like an incredible learning, all the sort of administrative tasks that you need to do, all the knowledge that you need, to be a manager. So I was really lucky in that sense. Lucky, but also I made myself completely invaluable. I just got in there and was like, I never ever want to let this job go. Like, I need to make myself, that they don't want to lose me, and work really hard. So.
Do you think people realise how much a manager's job entails? Because you have to be across so many things.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can explain, there obviously isn't a standard day in the life of a manager, but there's things that you have to deal with across a week. Yeah,
no, there isn't a standard day in the life, definitely, and that's probably one of the good things about it and the nice things about it, that every day is different and there's exciting things that happen. There's also loads of really boring things that you have to deal with that nobody else wants to deal with, I think the short answer to what does a manager do is that you are the only person with, or one of the only people with direct contact with the artist and the rest of the team and the sort of broad overview of what that artist is working on. But if you wanted me to sort of elaborate on that, there's probably two sides to it. One is the sort of business and project management side to it, where you are building a team around each of your artists. So that might involve getting a record deal for them, a publisher or a publishing team, a live agent, road crew, a stylist, a graphic designer, an accountant, a lawyer, all those people that your artist might need. And that changes obviously through different points in their career. You add to it, you take things away. You look at the money, the cash flow, how you budget every single project that your artist does. Who's paying for it? Is it making any money? Is it worth it? Can you afford it? All that sort of thing. And then I guess you're putting some strategy around it. So you might think, where are we now? Where do we want to be in 18 months' time? How is that going to work? Using the team that we've got, the record deal that we've got, the money that we've got available, how are you going to get from here to there using those things? And of course the plan changes all the time, so you are the person directing the team and saying to the live agent, well, when are we going to tour in Europe? When are we going to tour in the UK? When's the best point to put the album out? So that's the really obvious sort of project management businessy side of things. On the other side, you have to be really comfortable with the creative, and I guess that's the thing that's less tangible and less measurable, and quite difficult to explain a lot of the time, because it's you might spend a really lot of time talking about idea. Your artist is the person that is delivering the music. That is firmly their responsibility, and I trust all my artists to deliver amazing music. That's their part of the bargain. But you might be a sounding board for ideas, and you might spend a really long time just talking about quite abstract ideas on music, or feeding back on a backing vocal on a chorus, or thinking about crazy ideas for videos. And actually that side of things, you don't really want to put that order onto it. You want to sort of allow that's where the magic and the excitement is. A really great song into your inbox can fix all of the problems on the other side. So it's really, really important to be sort of comfortable with that, like almost encouraging that freedom and that chaos on the other side as well, but just you're there to underpin it. Sorry, I've gone on a bit long about that.
No, it's absolutely fascinating listening to you explain it, and at the same time thinking, me and him, we could never be managers. I don't, because you need a certain temperament.
I could be a really bad manager, I think. I could be a terrible manager.
Yeah, I've been a really bad manager. I managed a band back in the 80s for about 6 months, and I was awful at it because I didn't really have the patience, and I think maybe I was trying to overlay what I believed about pop music onto them, and had all these strange ideas, none of which I got off the ground. So you have to be, I don't know what you consider, what's a really good temperament, or you were talking about the skill range that you need to be a good manager.
I would say you have to be, you don't want to be adding like drama and chaos into a situation, so you probably have to be quite unflappable in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, sometimes things happen and you're like, fucking hell, but you have to be a problem solver, I would say. I think honesty, actually, is a good one. Like, you have to be quite transparent. Everybody has their own different management style, but I'm really into like transparency and telling the artists how things work and being honest with them. I don't think I could sleep at night if something was going wrong and I was trying to hide it from them. So I think for me, that works, and I think for the artists that I work with, that sort of works as well. Tenacity, in the sense of like, things aren't always going to go right. You just keep going. You've got to just keep going and keep going. I manage the Fat White Family, and that's takes ages to do stuff sometimes with them, and things can be hard, especially in that creative area. I think that the last 3 minutes.
Everyone in the audience is just thinking, "Oh, you manage Fat White Family." That's not an easy gig. I doubt that's an easy gig.
You missed Working Men's Club as well, actually. I managed them too as well.
Yeah, of course, Working Men's Club.
We can't miss them. Yeah.
But I mean, I imagine Working Men's Club being easier to deal with. You don't have to tell us who's.
No, it's fine. Like, I think all artist management is hard, and actually,
well, it never ends for a start, does it? Because it's not like it's a 9 to 5 job. If somebody's got a problem at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're going to phone you.
Yeah, that's where boundaries come in, though, Steve. You have to have really good boundaries. Actually, I'm really good at that now. I think in the very beginning, I was less good at it. I think when you're just like, oh my God, I have to answer the phone. I think as well, with the artists that I manage now, like even Fat Whites, it's like, they know really, if it's an emergency, of course, I will answer the phone. Of course, I'm self-employed. I think that goes, for all self-employed people, probably. If there's an emergency, I'll answer the phone, I'll try and sort it, of course, because I care about it as well. I don't want things to be like unravelling and me not to be there. But you do have to put boundaries in place, to sort of protect yourself and your own sort of emotional health, and have your own life as well, So, yeah, sometimes the phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning and somebody's in Australia and the bus has broke down, or like whatever, there's some kind of disaster and you're like dealing with it. But then they do know, most of my artists, to be mindful of that. I think things are changing a little bit in that respect as well now.
It's interesting as well because I don't think we always think about this, but the idea that I mean, your careers are sort of slightly intertwined, because if they do well, you do well. Because I don't know what the standard percentage is for a manager, but you know, if for a time nothing's happening, then no one's making any money, are they?
No, and I think that is one of the things that really sets the job aside as being something quite unique, in the fact that you have to get your head around that sometimes some of the things that you're working on will not work. It's really unpredictable. Like, if you want to make good art, like, I'm not an artist, obviously my artists are, but if you want to make good art, sometimes it is like there's a thread you're pulling on an idea that you're working on to see if it will come to anything. And sometimes it can take months, and you've invested lots of time and lots of energy into this thing, and you get to the point it's like it's not worked. And you really just have to like get your head around the fact that is, you can project manage something to within an inch of its life, you know, but unless there's a good song, it's just not going to work. So you do have to get used to that. And I think the longer I've done it, the more calm I am about that. You know, you just think, well, you know, something will come through. But you have to explore those ideas in order to make the good music, and stuff. Some things work and some things don't.
I mean, I was kind of keen to ask about how things have changed
in
terms of what you're doing. Because I remember, like, about 15 years ago, we were trying to do a thing for Music Ally about managers talking about digital stuff. And we had real struggle getting people to talk about it, because they were like, actually, we're not, the label were doing a lot of that, and we're not.
Yeah.
But my impression nowadays is that managers are all over that stuff. And they've actually taken on a lot of the things that labels maybe used to do with digital and tech and streaming. But how has the job changed, like, over that last
I don't think managers have taken it on because they necessarily want to. I think it's just become like a necessity, because nobody else was doing it and it was important. And I actually think, just to get into the sort of business side of things, I guess, the difference in the deals that are done nowadays sometimes require the manager to do a lot more stuff that a label would necessarily take on. Like, back, 15 years ago or whatever, the deals that an artist would be doing would be, are you doing an indie deal or a major deal? They'd be the sort of record deals that you do. Whereas nowadays, it's like, are you signing to an indie, a major, label services? Are you setting up your own label and doing a distribution deal? And artists have that choice now to do those things. But if you want to do a label services deal, for instance, or a distribution deal to set up your own record label, which loads of artists have done. I think Ray is on a distribution deal, I think.
Yeah, Human Resources, I think it is.
Something like that. But those sorts of deals now that didn't sort of exist back then, they are label services. So it's, you are doing a lot of the work that a label would do. You're providing the sort of assets, for want of a better word, the artwork and the videos, and you have more control over those things. So I think the shift in the deal, as well as the digital stuff, which is just like really obvious, across the board, obviously in every job, people have to do more social media now, which artists absolutely hate. So the artist artist manager will take it on a lot of the time. There are special companies that do that now. But aside from the things that are really obvious, like the world has changed, social media exists, Spotify exists, I think the deals have changed, and that means that more responsibility is out of these sort of companies,
I've got one last very quick question, which is, what's the best bit of news you've ever given one of your artists, and how did they react?
Oh, God. The best bit of news. Well, do you know what? I think there are real, like, there are moments, obviously, like, somebody being nominated for an Ivor Novello, or when I managed Back for Lashes, she was nominated for the Mercury Prize, and that was really great. So they're really nice bits of news to give to people. But I think my sort of favourite bit, and the artist's favourite bit, is, when you've worked really hard on something and you've believed in something and then it pays off. When Fat White Family was signed to Domino Records, we were all like, we'd really love to get them in the top 20. Imagine Fat White Family in the top 20, it'd be great. And we just sort of had it in mind, and everybody like worked really hard to sort of get it, and it, you know, it paid off, and it was brilliant. It was such a good feeling to do that and get it there, you know. So I think those awards seem like the obvious thing to say, but then I don't think they're the best bit, you know.
So it's sometimes it's something which seems like the day-to-day,
yeah,
which, as you say,
or a really great gig, you know, like really somebody nailing a sold-out gig in front of an amazing crowd, and you just stand there like, this is it, what it's about, you know. It's brilliant.
Never going to feel as proud, are you?
Exactly.
As standing in an audience with, with an artist you work with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're definitely the best bits over and above, I think.
That's brilliant.
The awards.
I know we're tight for time, so stay put, because there's going to be some more questions in a second. But let's introduce somebody who you've worked with, who has also worked with not just the great and the good in Sheffield and the Sheffield music scene, but with artists from all over the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Ross Orton. And Ross Orton's beer.
We kept it cool for you.
Welcome to Sheffield.
Oh, thank you.
It's lovely to be back.
Yeah,
I just think, I suppose here's the first thing. Could you have done what you've done and achieved and built anywhere else? It'd have to be somewhere.
No, definitely not. No, that's why I've stayed here. That's why I'm not in London. I thought about it. I thought about going down there. I had plenty of connections down there, plenty of friends, and I don't know. There was too many distractions. Like in Sheffield, there's no distractions. It's just it's a slow pace of life, but then has a lot of talented people, a lot of very humble, talented people. Of course, there's egos and stuff like that around, which you need in music, you know, to get things started. But I just felt like Sheffield just left me alone to do what I needed to do, which actually I didn't know what it was I needed to do. But, you know, I started off as a drummer, never wanted to be a producer, kind of fell into it through getting into electronic music, dance music, going to raves, buying vinyl, sold a drum kit, bought a pair of decks, sold the decks, bought a mixing console, bought a mic, then bought another drum kit, and then getting people in my bedroom where I had a sampler and a synth, and you know, it was an interesting time of just hanging out and not thinking about the industry and not being surrounded by the industry, and just left alone to just tinker, and you know, there was no pressure at all. It was a great time.
It sounds quite similar to what you were saying, Sarah. This idea of you didn't go to production college and do a course and get a qualification, but it organically happened.
But you know, I think, you know, my last engineer, he was in Leeds. He studied an engineering course, production course, and then came to me, and then I showed him how to plug a mic in, which he was meant to have known how to do that after a 3-year course, but yeah, I mean, them things are good, you know. I mean, I got so much like respect for Sarah, you know. I mean, I didn't know that's what managers do. She's managed me for how long? I don't know. You want a pay rise? Amazing. But yeah, no, I mean, that's. I think the game changed massively for me when I did get a manager, who actually was Jeff Barradale, who worked for Wildlife, and then Sarah kind of came in, and she was doing a great lot of day-to-day for Jeff, and that's how we kind of. That's when you were working in the office with.
I think it was the other way around.
Yeah, in their rehearsal room, and I kind of went in and met Jeff, and.
Is that how you got to know? You must have known. Did you know the Arctic Monkeys before that?
I'd met them a couple of times, knocking around, but we knew each other because it wasn't really kicking off for them massively then, you know. So we kind of knew because of the management connections, and just people just know each other in this city.
It's going all right from now, innit?
Do you, when you're producing or working with an act on a record, how do you get them to? Because you have to build a connection, don't you? Because they have to have faith in your ideas, however mad, brilliant, inventive, retro they are. Yeah. You have to. So how do you do that, and how did you do that with them?
Well, yeah, you have to become a trusted, I suppose, member of the band. Not a friend. You don't have to be a friend. You don't have to be, part of the family. But you've got a very short window of opportunity to make that connection. Sometimes a band will come to me and they don't know who I am. It's their manager or their label that said work with this guy, or they've chose to work with me and they know exactly who I am and what I do. Which still doesn't make it like that connection happen instantly. You've just got to get in. I think you just get in there as quickly as possible. Don't talk about what it is you need to do. Just get recording straight away. That's the language that everybody identifies with in the room, you know what I mean? And make sure that the studio isn't a massive distraction. Oh, what's this do? It's like, just plug that in and play it. You know what I mean? Show me that line again. That's wicked. What's that like? You get on the drums, get that vibe going. That's how it works. And if that fails, go to a pub. Then come back a bit pissed, and then try it again. It usually works.
Do people try it? Do people feel like they have to overthink it? Then do they feel like they come in and they want to talk for 3 hours about how it's going to work and what's going to happen?
Some people do. I think the big difference from when I started out is nowadays everybody's got a laptop, so there were no laptops. Computers were there, but not what they were like. All the Atari computers were in like MIDI. But there was no like hard drive recording at that time. But as soon as that became more popular, and now it's really popular, every band has a laptop. Not everybody in the band, but there is a band laptop, and they're demoing stuff, and they can spend as long as they want on that piece of music. They could have been doing it for 2 years, layering and layering and layering and layering, and then I hear it, and I'm like, let's take a few of them things out, let's make space for that, and it's like do a bit of plumbing or a bit of house clearing, you know what I mean? Just to kind of get back to the bare bones of the tune. But there's that demoitis thing that bands get really attached, even record labels get really attached to the demos. And I'm not saying I have my vision when I first hear the song, but I do have an instinct and I know what's wrong with it and I know how I think I can make it better. So yeah, sometimes you butt heads a little bit, but it's rare. It's rare. If I'm honest, it's yeah.
First time, and this was around the time where I had my ill-fated trying to manage a band phase, and I asked somebody, I don't know, because there was a band living local to me at the time. I was living in Harlow at the time. And I said, and they'd had a producer for a record. And I said, what does the producer do? And the guy from the band turned around and looked me in the eye and said, just takes out a load of bass notes.
Yeah.
When the bass guitarist is playing too many, just take things out. Yeah. That's what a producer does.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't want to pull back the veil on magic.
Yeah,
but,
sometimes producers just buy the pizzas. Do you know what I mean? Or the beers, or I think these days what I've learned I have to do is everything. The only thing I don't do is mastering. I just won't go there. I've always got my guys who do that, but I record, I produce, and I mix. I'm not a trained engineer. I just got into it. I like the idea of what does that sound like down a microphone, and what's the rest of the chain doing, and how's that coming out of the speakers, and making everybody in the room familiar with that process, but without distracting them from the music.
This is a question probably for both of you, really. But do you think that the music industry, the record labels, Do you think they've started to undervalue producers in some genres of music? Again, talking to, I think it was Stephen Street who was bemoaning the fact that record labels have reduced budgets for groups to go into better, good studios with an experienced producer, which reduces the opportunities available for really good producers to make their mark.
I think some record labels go with the same producers too much. Do you know what I mean? I think there'll be certain producers, I don't want to name names obviously, but there's certain producers out there who do get a lot of gigs from certain labels, and it's like, maybe because they're a safe pair of hands or whatever,
Or they'll do what the label want with the song.
Or that.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that, Steve, yeah.
I think what you see a little bit more, sorry to butt in, Ross.
Sorry.
I think what you see a little bit more nowadays as well, and I sort of experience it on both sides because I work with artists and I work with a producer, is that, and you'll probably agree with this, is that we're seeing a lot more people coming to you now saying they need to develop some songs in order to get a deal.
Yeah.
So they're a great band, but they have no money, and they want to get some songs together that sound great in order to go and shop those songs around labels. Whereas before there was probably a bit more development money in labels. They'd take a bit more of a punt on like developing new artists, and I think now we're probably seeing a lot more producer might have to take that risk in the early days, I suppose.
We were talking about this on the train up, actually, weren't we? Like how one of the points that the labels talk about is how much we spend on A&R and artist development. Yeah. And we were saying sometimes you hear stories that suggest actually some of those budgets are being cut. It's not quite as...
Yeah. It varies from label to label as well, all the labels are so different, when you think about the sort of range of from indie to major, they'll all have different ways of doing things, but I do think that has changed a little bit. Yeah.
And the other thing for that then, for somebody like yourself who has always, in my mind, worked on projects which have attempted to move music forward in a way, they're interesting, they're not mainstream, easygoing projects, but to work with those artists, it kind of feels like that must be quite a precarious financially to be able to pay the rent every so often, because I don't know if the money's there because you've stuck to your guns.
It's more, but it's more how you invest that money. So I have my own personal recording space studio up in Sheffield. What's difficult about that is obviously I'm not on the doorstep of all the record labels in London knocking on the door. They know I exist if I go down there, regardless of the records that I've made. You have to be knocking on doors. But I generally work when the phone rings. It'll be somebody who's heard something and know it's going to work, and they'll get on the phone and they just go, we've got to work with you because you do this thing that is going to elevate our music. And then it usually elevates me as well, because they're right, they're listening, they're the best moments. And record labels have those moments. Domino have had that with me, Rough Trade have had that with me, Heavenly have had that with me. They've specifically come to me and gone, we want you to do this record, and it's worked. And I've just gone, I wonder why they've chose me. But that thing of getting back to the question is the wages or the money that I bring in. It's crucial to me that goes back into the studio for repairs. Everything's breaking. I've got a lot of analog equipment. Some of it's very old, some of it's new. You're constantly wanting to update and make that studio like seamless. No crackles, no pops, no hisses. When that band comes in from wherever, they might have a really, really stressful, they've been on tour for a month, and the record label's gone, you need to go in, they've not even had any time off, they've not gone home, and they're coming in the studio, and they don't want any downtime there, it's just get it out.
Again, I think that's when people forget what an artist needs, isn't it? One of the best things, we spoke to Nathan Clark from the Broodnell Social Club.
I love Nathan.
Yeah, he's brilliant, and the Broodnell is a great place. And I've done I did a gig there with one man show, and he was showing us around, and he was one of the people who said, "Do you see this here? When people arrive, the first thing we do is make them a cup of tea." And you go, "That's understanding."
Yeah.
you know, a band have been in.
That's why everyone likes the Brood now, you know, because he looks after them.
Yeah, and similarly, making somebody relaxed in their artistic environment, looking after them, setting the scene for the relationship.
Yeah.
Well, I had an AI question, actually, because I get every so often an AI press going, your future, your producer will be an AI, and you can ask it to produce you like any famous thing you want. Yeah. But everything you've talked about is stuff that an AI wouldn't do. It might be able to capture a certain sound of an album, but it can't do all the other things that make a band feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Do you, I mean, both actually, I've seen AI manager press releases too.
Have you heard an AI track though?
Yeah. Well, I made some, and Steve gave them a slaughtering on our podcast last week. Yeah. But I mean,
honestly, though, you should hear his AI version of ABBA. It's an absolute abomination.
But I mean, do you ever look at when those sort of technological developments come on that might kind of disrupt what you do? Do you ever look at those and go,
like the Atmos thing? So, they call it the immersive experience. Like, immersive to me is like when you sat reading a book. It's you and it. It's not a collective. Don't say collective. You know, like I know what that system's doing, but I don't know. It just feels like going on a roller coaster on your own, or even worse, just being shut in a room with a pair of headphones on and no one there to enjoy the music with you and that experience. You know what I mean? I suppose if it's in a theatre and there's visuals and that thing's going and it sounds great and brilliant, but I don't know why record labels are investing so much money in, because I'm having to provide all the stems and the multi-tracks, all this stuff, especially now for Atmos mastering, and it's a bit of a pain in the arse sometimes. You know what I mean? Because I don't know how to, it's a new system. And you're not, until you get onto the phone to the mastering guys, like, just give me this, or she's give me that. You know what I mean? It's this. They're investing a lot of money into that.
It's like those home cinema systems where you have to have the one armchair in exactly the right place, and no one else can sit with you and watch the film because there's only one spot in the room that has the kind of perfect sound.
Well, it's like that thing of listening.
Don't give the major labels any ideas. Imagine that one ticket that they'll be selling to. I don't know.
Well, it's like that thing though, like, I'll do a mix and somebody listening to it in the car, and they go, IAT's really, really loud, man. Can you turn the IAT down? I'll be like, what side of fucking car you sat on? They'll be like, left. And we're like, yeah, because I mixed it from drummer perspective. And IAT's in left door, and you're there. It's like, get in back seat, sit in middle, do that, and turn it up. It's mental. And I get them, like Sarah said, I get them text messages at 3 in the morning. Can you turn claps up? It's like, what claps? You never recorded any claps. Because they've had a few, and they're like, sure, we did claps on this tune,
I have to say, I love the fact that you've brought stems into this conversation, because if you manage a producer, stems is like the bane of your life. Like, as soon as you bring delivering stems up, it's really funny. You get, I can see when Ross calls me, I think, oh God, it's those stems.
It's just
somebody's asked for stems.
Just a text message that just says stems, bloody
an
stems.
A&R from Ireland with the title stems. You're like, oh no, Ross has got to deliver the stems.
We have 6 minutes left before our deadline. Does anyone have any questions? There's a spotlight in my eye, so it's difficult to see, but I can definitely see there's a hand up over there. If we can get a microphone around. So I'm really sorry, genuinely can't see you.
Cool. So, you're obviously all involved in different sides of music, like all of you on the stage. If you were going to say to a band who's on the verge, where do you invest your pot of money? You've got 3 priorities. Where would you invest it now?
What sort of level are we at?
So, on the verge, not yet signed. They've got some really good songs, but we're not quite there. Is it your pluggers? Is it your producers? Where would you go?
Obviously, you're going to have to invest some money in a rehearsal space, because, you can't rehearse at your mum's house at 2 in the morning, with neighbours going, what the fuck. So you've got to invest in a little space. Yeah. Get some instruments that work, and and then get some gigs. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of time you're paying to play these days. It costs you. You know what I mean? So invest some money in in that.
If you're, I mean, depending on how on the verge you are, bear in mind these things. If it takes off, if it happens, I don't know if you agree with this, if it's going about, if you've got the benefit, what you actually want to invest in is time. Because the thing that you won't have when the band takes off or the artist takes off is time. Write loads of songs. Yeah. Start working on loads of material. Have loads of ideas. It'll be a whirlwind after you cross that verge.
Yeah.
So make sure, work on the music. The other things, you don't necessarily have to worry about radio pluggers and things right away, because, I mean, if you spent money on the radio plugger but not the track, then if the track's no good, then you won't get anywhere paying X amount of money to a radio plugger.
Yeah, I've had bands come to me specifically to re-record something that they've self-produced because Radio 6 have turned it down. Yeah. You know, the producers on your show, whatever, you know, I've had that come back, so it's like, can you get this band and we do it, and it gets on radio. There is a certain level of, like, you know, sonic excellence that needs to be achieved to get it, you know, in that kind of listening space, which is radio and TV.
I think it's, Sarah, I don't know what you think, but you've just got to be ready and you've got to be good. It's like I always say to people who hand us demos, who say we've been together for 9 months, and I always say, well, do you think you're going to be better in 6 months' time? Yeah, we're going to be loads better. Take this back and come back in 6. Be ready, be good. Make sure you've got a decent manager, a decent agent, and possibly a really great van. Be ready to go, and that's.
Yeah. No, I agree with what you were saying about time. You know, like I said earlier, like a great song can solve all the problems on the other side, and I think anybody that's worth their salt in the industry, really, that's what they're looking for. It's not just a great social media presence, although nowadays, obviously, that helps, you know. But it's a really great catalogue of songs, you know. And the more of those songs that you've got, the better. So, like you said, if you've spent time writing and honing that, and developing a group of musicians around you that you can play with, whether that's like you're all in a band together, or you've got your gang of, you know, your sax player that you can call in and your drummer that you can call in to, you know, if you're a solo artist, and developing those sorts of things is really important. You know, like you said about a radio plugger as well, you know, if you've got one song or two songs that are great and you think, oh, we'll try and get those on the radio, a really good radio plugger, the first thing they're going to say is like, okay, well, what's the plan? You know, when's the album coming out? And if you've got one or two songs, you're not going to have the answer to that. Radio, I mean, you know more about this, but they want to invest in something that, you know, invest their energy and into a project that they know is going to have more songs come in, you know, down the line, rather than just being like sort of
a great catalyst, really.
one hit, you know.
And that happens, then just roll with it. It's great.
Yeah. I've got to
be ready.
I mean, the other thing I'd say is it doesn't cost much, but mailing list, like. People often get hung up on like how many I've got to get Spotify followers, I've got to get Twitter followers, Instagram, and I think a mailing list. Some of my friends who are artists, it's the most powerful thing for them. The people who wanted to give them their email and keep in touch.
Yeah.
And people often get a certain point of their careers, go, oh shit, the label had all the data, we haven't got a mailing list. So that's the other thing I'd say, but it doesn't cost very much at the beginning, does it?
We are out of time, unfortunately. Can I just say an amazing thank you to our guests. Thanks to Sarah and thanks to Ross. Can we have a round of applause, please? Thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much to Crossed Wires for inviting us here in the first place. If you've enjoyed this, tell your friends. As I say, you'll find us wherever you find your podcasts. We are The Price of Music. He is Stuart Dredge. I'm Steve Lemack. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. See you later, everybody.
Sarah Brooksbank, Ross Orton, and the wonderful audience in Sheffield, which, I mean, we should say thank you very much to Sarah and Ross for giving up their Saturday afternoon to come and join us. But they were great. I mean, some really fascinating stuff. Don't you think, Stuart?
I think so, yeah. We just got a real sense of what you have to do. And do you know, I felt there was a running theme, which is like all the stuff they do to give their artists, or the artists they're working with in Ross's case, is to give them that space to be creative, to give them their best thing. It's like all the kind of human stuff they do. And I mean, I was getting at it with one of my questions about this idea. I've been pitched like AI music managers and AI producers. They're the future. And you think, actually, a certain amount of this is technical skills and knowledge, but it's also all the human stuff of making bands feel comfortable, making artists feel like they can have their best time to create. And you just got a real sense of why humans do these jobs, and why, it's going to be very hard for them to be replaced, I hope.
And in some cases, what they, the demands as well. I mean, the point about you're never off duty, I think, is really important, because you're constantly there, whether you're working on behalf of the artist or you're a shoulder to cry on or lean on. I mean, it's such a demanding job, I think.
Yeah, and I thought that thing Sarah said as well about having boundaries, setting boundaries, that was interesting. I feel like you say, it isn't always on job, but it sounds like she certainly has a sense of, but we need boundaries or none of us are going to be healthy. That feels like something maybe in the modern music industry we're talking about a bit more now. Like, yes, you could ring your manager up at 3 a.m. because you've fallen out of the coach somewhere in Japan and they will try and sort it out. But there are boundaries too. But yeah, I think it was just, I don't know. And they were both, I mean, they both just seemed, I don't know, really just quietly knowledgeable about what they do and why they do it. Like, if I was an artist working with them, I feel like they would just make me feel confident. They know what they're doing, and they have a real sense of what artists need. So yeah, it was really good.
So thank you, Sarah and Ross and everyone at Crossed Wires. And thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this edition, please do subscribe to the show in your podcast app and give us a review, and maybe pass the word on to friends, colleagues, passing musicians. We'd be most appreciative. You can also support the show now via our new Patreon page, where you can become a Price of Music fan or super fan for as little as £2 a month. You just have to go to, if you're interested, www.patreon.com/thepriceofmusic to find out more. And if you have a question which you'd like us to address, to attempt to answer on the show, anything money and music related, you can email us at this address:
thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com.
Till next time, take care, everyone. Cheerio.